Member Odegaard.
Hi there. How are you this morning, Jeff?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Good. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Councilmember McCarthy.
Are we? Oh, okay.
Good morning, Brandon.
Morning, sir.
Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning, Jeff.
And good morning, Councilmember Salas.
Good morning, everyone.
We have a tremendous showing from the City of Flagstaff, and I just received a text from Supervisor Babbitt saying he wasn't going to be able to make the meeting. We need Matt Ryan to have a quorum, and it looks like he's just jumping in. There's Matt Ryan.
Yes. Which one?
I said I saw the mayor got half a page in the newspaper this morning.
Oh, I did?
You did.
I have not been out yet to be looking at the newspaper. Did they print my article that I asked them to print?
It printed today.
Maybe. Oh, awesome. I'm gonna have to go look for it. So do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I would like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Executive Board of the Metro Plan Greater Flagstaff. Provide notice that we have the option to recess into executive session for legal advice should we so choose to do so. At this particular time, can we have roll call?
Yes, Coral Evans.
Present.
Charlie Odegaard.
Present.
Jesse Thompson. Matt Ryan.
Here.
Art Babbitt. Not here. Jim McCarthy.
I'm here.
Steve Peru is not present. Regina Salas.
Present.
And Jim Parks. And staff, we have Jeff Meilbeck.
Here.
David Wessel.
Present.
Rosie Ware present. And Martin Ince. And then can we also get a roll call of who is on the phone and not on the board?
This is Brandon Kavanaugh, legal counsel.
This is Andrew Iacona with NAU.
Good morning, Greg Clifton, City of Flagstaff. I'm just going to participate or listen for the first part of the meeting.
Thank you.
Ed Stillings, Federal Highway Administration.
Anyone else? Let's see. I think that completes the roll call.
Thank you so much. We are now down to item number C. This is public. Yes.
Excuse me, and Rosie,
Yes.
I want to let you know that I just got a text from Supervisor Thompson. He's trying to get in to the meeting. I wonder, Dave Wessel, if you could maybe reach out to him and see if you can't help him navigate the tech. I don't know who else to ask at this point, and I'd like to let him in.
I'll do what I can.
Thank you. To you.
We are now down to item number C. This is a public comment. These are for items that are not currently on our agenda. Because of open meeting laws and whatnot, we cannot respond to anything that we hear during this time. We can definitely listen. Is there any public comment that's been submitted?
Sorry, Madam Chair, no, there is no public comment.
Not. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move down into item number D. This would be approval of minutes. These would be our minutes from our regular meeting that happened on April 1st, 2020. It would be pages 5 through 10 in the packet. Do I have an approval?
This is
Mayor,
Charlie, I approve them.
and I'll second Jim McCarthy.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Odegaard with a second by Mr. McCarthy for approval of the minutes from our meeting April 1st, 2020. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We're now down to section 2 of our agenda. We have nothing on the consent agenda, so we will just go ahead and move down to general business, which is section 3 of our agenda. First up in general business would be A. This would be the fiscal year 2021 budget on pages 11 and 19 of your packet. Mr. Malvat.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm going to put a PowerPoint presentation up on screen that's very consistent with what you have in your packet. And just give me 1 minute here to get the tech working. And I hope you can all see the MetroPlan PowerPoint logo. It says budget, May 6, 2020.
We can.
Okay. So the presentation today, this arguably may be the briefest budget presentation you've ever had. I can make it as long as you want. However, we reviewed the 2020 budget report in February, and there are not significant changes going forward in the recommended budget for 2021. Prepared for you to adopt it today, and also prepared for it to be moved forward to June if you prefer. I also want to share 5-year projections for the MetroPlan budget. And essentially, if we look at the fiscal year 20 budget versus what we project to spend by the end of June 30th, you can look at major categories. Salary and benefits are tracking right to budget. We're about 99% spent. Operating is significantly over budget. It's even more over budget than it was when I presented 2 months ago. We budgeted $54,000. We're projecting to spend $141,000 this year. This is because we are paying indirect costs to the city for all the services they provide, and also incurring costs to become independent, such as legal fees that we've incurred. I do want to point out, since our attorney's on the phone, they are of great value, legal fees, but there are certainly things that we needed to do to become independent with a number of IGAs that required a significant amount of legal time. Office space, some furniture, utility expenses have come up. So a number of other items, and there's detail on that in your packet if you want to go further. So they're overspent, and as we go into future years, I'm looking for those to come back into line. And I'll show you that slide in just a few minutes. Travel, I projected to spend the budget fully a couple of months ago, when of course with COVID-19, I don't expect us to spend more than half of the budget since no one's traveling. And then our project budget is also significantly underspent. And this goes back to the fact that we've spent the year planning and getting focused and determining where it's best to use our resources. And we've only spent a small percentage of what we had budgeted initially. So looking forward to next fiscal year, And again, if you want to look at the detail, you've got spreadsheets further in your packet, and I'll get to those in a minute. However, looking at the 5-year, salary and benefits actually drops next year and then stays at a constant rate. Half-time position of a multimodal planner is moving to the city, and we don't expect to add any additional staff. Operating expenses come back down, and we anticipate they will stay there. Travel, actually, I anticipate it's going to go back up and then stay flat. Frankly, that's a conservative estimate. I think these changes in travel might continue through the bulk of next fiscal year, but really it's anybody's guess. And then projects, whoops. If you look at projects, you'll see that we're not spending very much, less than $200,000 this fiscal year, but then we spend $650,000 next year on projects to kind of make up for this year and get projects rolling. And then we level out at about $400,000 a year on projects for the next 4 years. So there is plenty of detail in the budget. And again, I'm happy to go as deep as you want on some of the reasons for revenue and salary expenses. Also, some of the line items that we have on operating expenses. And we also have capital expenses on the last page that we'll be talking about even more in the next section. And in the interest of time, and I certainly don't want to rush this if anybody wants to go deeper, I just want to point out that as a new organization, we do have a fund balance projection. The City of Flagstaff has very graciously been floating MetroPlan for 22 years. So if we ever had a cash flow problem, the city would just cover it. We don't have that luxury starting July 1st. So I want to point out that our estimate for a fund balance projection for the next 5 years, I want it to stay at 100,000. So we'll be at 97,000 in 21, and we'll end the 5-year period at about 126,000. At least that's the projection today. And the options today are you can adopt the budget now if you like, you can modify the budget before adoption. And also I want to point out you might want to postpone adoption till June. One of the items in this agenda packet is to review the project prioritization. So we've got about $650,000 to put into planning projects. The total budget is not going to increase. It'll still be $650,000. And I want to make clear the budget capacity can be moved between capital projects even after adoption. So for example, if you adopted it today with $100,000 in the Lone Tree Corridor, and then next month or next year, you wanted to move that $100,000 to West Route 66, that can always be done. So really the option is to you with those three. And with that, Madam Chair, I would put it back to you for questions, comments, and discussion.
So are there any comments, discussion? Board?
Mayor, this is Charlie. I do have a question for Mr. Milebeck. The question I have, does this budget, before we approve it, does that go before the TAC? Or has that been kind of the history of it going before the TAC before we approve it? And if that is the history, has that already been done?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Supervisor or Council Member Odegaard, yes and no. Presenting a budget like this is new in this format to you. I shared the budget report with the TAC 2 months ago. I'm going to share this with them next month. The way I don't ask for adoption. However, I do ask the TAC, and historically this has been done. We have a Unified Planning Work Program, and that's a document that ADOT requires. And that document basically is a budget. It's what the state requires us to adopt. And it says how much money we're going to spend on each project in the coming year. And we do ask the TAC and the board to adopt that as well. So it's kind of a yes and no answer to your question.
Okay, thank you.
So board, the option was that we could go ahead and move forward and adopt this budget now, or we can postpone it until June's meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the budget as is today?
Coral, this is Charlie, and I feel comfortable making that motion to adopt fiscal year 21 budget.
Is there a second to that?
I second
Mr. McCarthy?
the motion.
Okay, there's been a motion made by Mr. Odegaard with a second by Mr. McCarthy to adopt this budget for fiscal year 2021 for Metro Plan, Greater Flagstaff. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion does carry. Thank you very much. We are now down to item number 3. And we have someone who is now on the phone. Would this be Supervisor Thompson?
Supervisor Thompson.
Welcome to the meeting, Supervisor Thompson.
Yes, I couldn't get through Zoom. Is this I couldn't do it, so I had to call in.
Well, we appreciate the fact that you were able to call in and you're now here at the meeting with us. We are on item number 3. We're on item number 3B. This is Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan. This will be item number, page number 20 to 22 in the packet. And Mr. Wessel.
You're muted, Dave.
Yeah, excuse me. I thought I had hit the unmute button and the screen shifted on me. So, good morning, everyone. David Wessel, Planning Manager for Metro Plan. The Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, also known as the Coordinated Plan, is something that the MPO is responsible for and works very closely with Mountain Line on to complete. We're looking for adoption of this plan today. The plan really directs resources to the elderly and disabled program. You might hear us refer to the 5310 program, and it has historically funded projects like NAPTA's taxi voucher program, the ADA Plus program, which allows it to extend its its paratransit services beyond that 3/4 mandatory boundary, 3/4 mile mandatory boundary. It also funds services through NAU and it's historically funded things like capital purchases of vans and buses for agencies such as the Guidance Center and Hajona. We make a major update every couple years. This is a minor update, which is really just addressing the mobility management services that Mountain Line provides. That said, the update to the plan does include these bullets you're seeing on screen now, addressing some additional gaps in transportation services and some strategies to address those gaps. So the TAC and Management Committee have reviewed this, and both organizations are supportive, and they're looking for adoption by the executive board this morning. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Are there any questions, board? If there are not any questions, I would be looking for a motion to adopt the 2020 Metro Plan Mountain Line Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan.
Mayor, this is Charlie, and I so move to adopt.
This is Matt. I'll second.
Is there a second? There's been a motion made by Odegaard with a second by Mr. Ryan to adopt the 2020 Metro Plan Mountain Line Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? So, Mr. Thompson, I'm taking you as a yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, that motion does carry. Mr. Ryan, I do like your backdrop. I want to point that out. That's very different.
National
We're
movement
now
for
down to
kids during
item
COVID.
number 3. Okay, I'm like, I like that background. Very pretty. We're now down to project prioritization. You might have to help me with that, Mr. Malbeck. Update, and this would be pages 23 to 26 in our packet. Mr. Malbeck.
Hey, Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. I want to confirm that you can see the PowerPoint presentation up on the screen.
Yes.
Okay. There's a lot of information I'm going to be sharing with you in the next 2 PowerPoint presentations. And I know we have limited time, and I know you all have a good understanding of these issues already. So I'm going to err to the side of moving pretty quickly. Please, and if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, if I am moving too fast and somebody has a question or wants me to slow down, if they could just jump in and stop me, I would appreciate it. That just feels like the most expedient way to get through the material. There's a lot here, and it's a lot of
works for.
And I want to start with explaining kind of a context for why we're doing this. It really comes down to what are the best ways for Metro Plan as an organization to add value. And these really core questions about why we exist, what are our priorities, and how can we best help member agencies. And in January, this organization at the Strategic Advance identified some 5-year horizon items. So with our eye to the future, saying some things that aren't exactly, jingles that you would turn into a commercial, but they really are pretty concise statements of why we exist. So this concept of synergy and collaboration and multi-jurisdictional planning efforts, and completing shared priorities or projects that community partners cannot complete on their own. That's a place for us. Another place for us is to influence transportation funding. And another is really to facilitate communication and have one consolidated voice. So this project, or the strategic plan, also said, let's get measurable. So within the next 18 months, we want you to identify Metro Plan's role. Exactly how are you going to help us by inventorying regional priorities, evaluate these projects through a matrix, and then choose the top 3 and get clear on what Metro Plan is going to do. So in terms of progress and timeline, it was a couple of months ago, actually 3, Dave presented a draft tool to the Technical Advisory Committee, to the Management Committee and the board. And everyone provided, good, positive support for moving forward. And then Dave refined the tool and interviewed member agency staff to get their priorities. And then we ran these priorities through a matrix to come up with the top projects in April. And then just 2 weeks ago, the TAC and the Management Committee reviewed this model, and they provided input. Today, I'm going to be asking you to provide input, and then we're going to refine this further and go back to the TAC and the board, TAC and the Management Committee in May, and ask those committees to adopt priorities. And then we'll bring it back to you and ask you to adopt them next month. So it's, I believe, a very systematic and thorough process of getting input and buy-in. That's certainly the intention anyway. So to frame this a little bit, I want to be clear on the projects and priorities. Individual agencies have their stuff that they're going to do almost no matter what. So the city in the Lone Tree Corridor, for example, Mountain Line and their bus rapid transit system. And then there are some more regional and shared priorities. So Milton, although it's being led by ADOT, has the involvement and the interest of all the member agencies. ADOT and the city are working on the 4th Street Bridge widening and the BNSF corridor that affects everybody. And I frame those in relation to or comparison to Metro Plan priorities, and I go back to our priorities as Metro Plan. We're looking for projects that are multi-agency benefit, that have a staff need, where there's a funding opportunity, and that have a long-term time horizon as a planning organization. And the best example of a project that fits those criteria, regional transportation plan. And I'm going to go into some detail on what that project is in just a minute. And then Dave and I went through this and reviewed it with the TAC. There's really different types of priorities. So I hoped we could be as simple as just saying, we got 3 priorities, go for it. And frankly, I'd rather just have one. Let's just get it done. And that's not always realistic or reasonable. So we have 3 major planning projects, and then I'm recommending that we also identify 3 additionally, almost 3 major funding initiatives. Yes, there will likely be overlap, but not necessarily. So for example, the funding initiatives might be bike and ped funding. We might not have a bike and ped project as Metro Plan, but we might rally the troops and try to get additional funding to those projects as an MPO. And then I'm going to go very fast on this slide. There's a lot of other things that we do as an ongoing, as an organization. We participate in the planning efforts of other agencies. And then when I say we, I mean Dave manages a tremendous amount of data to make sure we are staying current in the traffic and transportation modeling that's provided. The goals of this exercise are to adopt project priorities that Metro Plan leads, and then do the same thing with funding initiatives that Metro Plan pursues. And then where are we going to provide support? Because it will be a time commitment to support other organizations. Even if we're not leading, that's okay. We still need to be engaged. And then we've got some routine work. And this next slide, I know it's a little bit wordy, and I'm actually going to go into some more detail and explain these things, but it does give an overview. If you look at the x-axis each fiscal year by quarter, and then if you go down the y-axis or left-hand column, you know, the projects where we are the planning lead, the projects where we are doing funding pursuit, projects where we're supporting member agencies, and then some of our more routine work. So first of all, planning lead. And the first one that I'm recommending we do is the regional transportation plan. And you can see a slide. This was last done 3.5 years ago. And the plan that was created was Blueprint 2040. So it's a 20-year plan, a very long time horizon. It benefits all of the members in the region. It's a mandated responsibility of MPOs to do this work. And there's funding available to Metro Plan to do this work. So it is one of our core projects for 21 and 22. I'm also at this time recommending, and this is all up for discussion with you today and taking it back to the TAC and the Management Committee next month, the Lone Tree TI. We've talked about this for a long time. It also has a long-term horizon. It's very much multi-agency. It affects everybody in the room. There's funding opportunity perhaps by leveraging Proposition 419 and 420. There's the build grant, the infra grant, and who knows what might be coming with CARES funding. And there really isn't any other agency who has yet assigned staff to the Lone Tree TI. ADOT's been involved in the past, but there's no one really leading this project at this time to make this component happen. The next planning project is West Route 66. And this is a new one for us, or for me to present to the Metro Plan Board. This has what I would call a medium time horizon. It's definitely multi-agency. It's a state highway, a lot of development that's going on in the city. It has a big impact on NAU, and it has transit runs on this corridor. Perhaps there's opportunity for leveraging the 419 funding. Perhaps the state can provide some funding since it's a state highway, and then maybe there's other funding we can pursue. But it is an example where it's regional and there's no one else really to lead this project right now. So it seems like it might be a good place for Metro Plan. And then I put the Milton Underpass. And this is more urgent. I wouldn't say it's long-term. It's very much multi-agency. There's a funding need. Everybody knows we need to do it. But at this point anyway, and maybe I'll get more information that will change my understanding of this, there's a staff need to get this done. And it affects everything that's going on in the BNSF corridor. And it's kind of like, what do we do with this crux of the issue? So this is one I want us to, suggesting we look closely at. And that brings us to pursuing funding. And Madam Chair, before I go on to funding pursuit, I'd like to just take a breath and see if there's any questions or comments from the board.
Board, do you have any comments or questions?
This is Charlie. I just would like to make a comment. The first two things that you identified, Lone Tree TI and West Route 66, those make sense right now. And from my understanding in the history, Lone Tree TI, it's regional, and there's no one taking the lead of creating that TI for Lone Tree. And then West Route 66, there is some city dollars with 419, but when you ask the state, because there has to be a partnership to do something with, excuse me, with West Route 66. Well, the state says they have no dollars identified for Route 66. And so I think this would be also a good project. Maybe we help with the city and in our capacity to try to help with ADOT to get the dollars they need to be a partnership on this. And then Milton, I don't have any history or background as of yet on that project. And I guess we'll see. And but everything you identified so far, it looks good, and it's very methodical. And we as Metro Plan can play a role in the lead of getting at least the two first projects that I'm aware of, hopefully completed, and especially with funding. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
I wanted to perhaps just mention the Milton Underpass that is up on the screen at this time. And I'm not sure if there's City of Flagstaff staff that can weigh into that, but I know that there has been numerous discussions with regards to the Rio to Flag and the partnership that we are forming with BNSF. And so I do think that if the board decides to move forward with that there needs to be very close coordination with city staff and understanding how all of that ties into the Rio to Flag and the work that is currently being done with regards to that partnership. Because it's really the City of Flagstaff, BNSF, and the state of Arizona when it comes to that particular section. And the Army Corps as well. I apologize. The Army Corps as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments or thoughts, board? Okay, Mr. Mileback. Let's continue.
Thank you. So funding pursuit, where might Metro Plan apply its energies to pursue additional funding? What ended up scoring very highly through the matrix and the ranking system was bike and ped. So we put this down for fiscal year 21 and 22. It's by definition multimodal, multi-agency. Again, there's funding in Proposition 419 for bike and ped that we might be able to leverage to bring in additional funding. And there seems to be a staff need, although the city is doing the planning with the multimodal planner. There could be a role for MetroPlan to try to bring additional money to the table to primarily the city, but other partners, perhaps NAU and the county as well, to do bike and ped funding. And then there's smart signals. And basically this is signal synchronization and higher tech signals that are more programmable to accommodate things like bus rapid transit and railroad crossings. And there's a grant available in fall of 2020. And I've got a typo here. It's actually multimodal. And again, multi-agency. Maybe we can leverage funding because 419 that the city is taxing themselves with has a lot of local match. And if that can be leveraged in a way that adds value against federal and other grants without increasing costs, without creating hardship on the city, we want to be able to do that. And there also seems to be a staff need here. This is a project Dave Wessel is familiar with, and we think we can pull off. And then federal infrastructure stimulus. This slide is very blank right now. We don't know what the legislation is going to be. And federal infrastructure funding is something we'll talk about later in this meeting. It's its own agenda item. And then we have the Build America Bureau. This is something we've talked to you about in the past. It's been a few months though. Essentially, the Build America Bureau has low interest loans. And Dave Wessel has put a tremendous amount of time into leading this project. He's presented in Washington, DC. He's done research. He's convened meetings with a lot of members of city staff. And essentially, the idea, what I'm recommending we do is really hand this off to the city. The city needs to decide if they really want to pursue this loan, if it's of value to them. And it doesn't seem like it's the best place for MetroPlan to be long-term, but it does seem like a good place for us to be in fiscal year 21 as we make the transition. And then I've just got a few more slides here. Again, support and routine, looking at providing $50,000 a year to small projects. We do letters of support to other agencies, which is really pretty easy. And I've been through this slide before. There's definitely work that we do that's outside of special projects that takes a considerable amount of time. And the next steps are basically right now to receive feedback from this board. Then I want to go back and refine the projects and the arguments. Then we present it to the TAC and the Management Committee in May. And then we refine the projects and arguments once again, and hopefully request board adoption in June. So that's the process. Madam Chair.
Okay, board, do we have any thoughts and comments?
Mayor, this is Charlie. I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Wessel and Mr. Mileback for all the work that was put in with it. And thank you for working with city staff to know what roles that we all should play in creating opportunities and getting projects completed. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Madam Chair, Matt Ryan here. Jeff, once upon a time we had J.W. Powell and 4th Street up there in the top 3, and I understand we're shifting them around and why some of the prioritization. I'm just curious on the 4th Street piece. Is it the assumption that now that the bridge is taken care of, compliments the city of Flagstaff on it, but the desire to get the build grant to finish the 4th Street piece, that's already in check, so not needing our backing associated with it? I'm just curious about how that, shifted out of there and where we are.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Supervisor Ryan, members of the board, I appreciate the question. It has shifted out mostly on the assumption that it's going to be completed and it's time for us as MetroPlan to move on. That said, Dave reworked the bill grant for this year and is going to be submitting it on May 18th. We're this fiscal year. It's really going to be under construction. And I don't know if the city manager is still on the phone, but when we met a few months ago, the question came up, why would we as MetroPlan keep this going if we're more long-term and the completion of this project seems inevitable? The only wrinkle that came into that is COVID-19 and how that might affect funding. But I'm still operating on the understanding that that's going to be done and it's time for us to move on to other more long-term projects.
Trying to undo my mute and it wasn't working. Okay, thank you. That answers that question. And then the other one is, I think I understand what you're saying with, all the work that Dave's done on the research of the Build America Bureau, the BABS program. The intent of passing it off at this point is if financing's pursued, that would be a city function, done enough research to get the background to pass it off to the city. Is that what's going on in that way? Because that aligns with, as we set these as priorities, try and find a funding source as well that might be able to foster opportunities for our partnerships that we have here. Is that what's going on?
Yeah, again, I appreciate the question. The way you framed it, I think, is exactly right. It seems to us that with this being a city project, the city having the information they need now, and the city needing to make their own cost benefit decision on whether or not the low interest loan and any additional requirements that come with it make it of value to the city is really a city decision. And so where Dave and I are now with this preliminary recommendation is that we basically hand that off to the city. And I say it's an iterative process because we're open for feedback. That's why we're going to discuss this with the TAC and the management committee next month and this board. And maybe there's something we're missing and, MetroPlan wants us to stay involved in that.
Okay, and it's just helped me understand, as we're transitioning from one to the other as prioritization. I'd be curious to see, as I think Charlie and both Coral noted, on the Milton Railroad crossing or overpass, the role that we can play associated with it. No matter what, all these always require the coordination through various agencies on where we play and how we help out associated with it. The recommendations that are in there make sense. They've been climbing up the ladder in terms of priority or areas that we can focus on and perhaps help out. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Jim
Are
McCarthy.
there any other thoughts?
Jim McCarthy. We've been talking about a lot of large, important projects, and I don't have any arguments with the discussion we've had. But I would just like to bring up one very small project that I've been getting a lot of emails on. And what that is on Highway 180 at Forest Street, just down from the hospital. There's a lot of concern by locals that it's difficult for their children to get across 180. and they were hoping that we could get some kind of pedestrian assistance for that crossing. Is that on any of our long lists of things that need to get done?
Madam Chair and Councilmember McCarthy, yes and no. What I have, first of all, I understand the need for that pedestrian crossing. And when we look at the criteria with which MetroPlan as a planning organization prioritizes projects, we're looking usually for multi-agency and longer term and planning projects. And the pedestrian crossing is really more of a design and then construction project. So although MetroPlan probably would not lead that project and take it on as one of our long-term priorities, what we do have to try to find this balance is I have put $50,000 in the budget for fiscal year 21, and that's basically a project we have in mind to be able to pass that money through to the city so the city or perhaps ADOT have additional funds to do the work. We need to do some kind of a competitive process, of course, because maybe there's another project that's more worthy, but that is a way for us to support that type of a project without us leading it. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So when people ask me, is it fair for me to say that there's no immediate plans for that improvement, but it is on the list of things that we will consider, competition with other ideas around town, but it is on the list. Is that correct?
Councilmember McCarthy, I wouldn't say it's on MetroPlan's list as a priority. I think that I would have to put that question back to the city of Flagstaff or ADOT as a design and construction priority. It's on my list to be able to, it's on MetroPlan's list to pass the money through to projects like that.
Madam Chair, can I add something?
Yes, please.
Yes, Councilmember McCarthy, members of the board, as you know, ADOT with a plethora of partners is working on a US 180 corridor master plan. And hopefully in the next couple of months, they'll be before the Board of Supervisors and City Council present progress on that plan. And we are discussing spot improvements. I don't know off the top of my head what was called for at this intersection, but certainly getting an improvement into that plan will improve its prospects for funding. So look for that when it comes before the council.
So it sounds like if people call me and ask about that intersection, what I should say is that when the planning process starts taking public input, that would be a very good time for those people to write some letters in support.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, good. I appreciate the time and the discussion.
Mayor, this is Charlie. I'd like to comment on that.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. I was in a meeting, trying to remember now when this was. It's been a little while, I bet 3-4 months ago. My memory escapes me, but Mr. Bauman was in that meeting, and I think maybe Mr. Milbeck was in that meeting. I know Audra Merritt was in that meeting, along with another 1 or 2 other ADOT staff members were in that meeting. And I know Jessica Drum was in that meeting concerning that crossing you just mentioned, Councilmember McCarthy. I know Jeff Bauman was going to work on it to create a solution for that crossing. And, of course, ADOT always starts their discussions is we have no money. And Mr. Milbeck is correct. That's why we were hoping for that, that 50,000 per fiscal year. So on a small project like that, MetroPlan, that's not a role with that project. But when ADOT says we have no funding, but the city of Flagstaff doesn't really have the funding to do a small project like that, and then that 50,000 will play a role and help to fund the project. And of course, as Mr. Milbeck says, it has to probably be a competitive process to award those dollars. But Mr. Wessel, I know you talked about, hopefully you'll have an update. And I haven't heard from Mr. Baumann either concerning that cross walk, I guess, across 180 there. So I'd be a curiosity myself to see what that progress is concerning that crossing intersection. So, but that's what I know of that issue. So thank you.
So it sounds like if we could get more information regarding that particular project, Mr. Malbach, that'd be extremely helpful. Is there anything else on this item?
No, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move down then to D. This would be a federal funding update. This would be pages 27 and 38 in the packet. We are looking for, our staff is recommending that we support the Transportation Business Partners Group in their seeking of increased federal infrastructure funding. Mr. Malbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I want to point out that Kevin Adam with the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council is here. And this item has developed significantly and quickly over the past couple of weeks. So my recommendation, I will get to near the end of the presentation, and I'm just going to start with an overview. I don't want to assume well, I'm just going to start with a general overview, and we can go deeper if you would like to. First of all, we have a strategic work plan item that is to secure at least $2.1 million in additional resources. So that gives us standing, of course, to get in here and do this work. When we look at the COVID-19 response, there have been a couple of acts already, and the first one did not include funding for transportation, nor did the second, the Families First Act. However, when we get to CARES Act, what we're calling 1 at this point, there wasn't funding for surface transportation so much, construction. However, there was funding for airports and also specifically for transit. So the Flagstaff area received $7.2 million, which went to Mountain Line. And that funding requires no local match, and it can be used for operating expenses to keep the system running. It doesn't even have to be included in the TIP or the STIP. So it's really money that's very incredibly easily accessible, so Mountain Line can continue to do their good work. Then we have CARES Act 2, whatever it might eventually be called. It's pending, and there's a lot of discussion and speculation here. The American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, AASHTO, is asking for $50 billion in emergency relief immediately, and then a 6-year reauthorized transportation bill. And there has been a moving forward framework drafted by the House of Representatives, and essentially with the anticipation that local revenues and state revenues are going to drop so much from economic activity, there's an expectation that infrastructure spending will happen. It's possible that programs like the Build Grant will receive additional funding, which could certainly help our chances of getting the 4th Street widening funding, that the grant that Dave is submitting in just a couple weeks. We just don't know yet. So Bob Holmes, who is a consultant for the city of Flagstaff and Mountain Line, and the city was involved, and they graciously invited Dave and I to participate in a meeting last week to start to develop a list of shovel-ready projects. Dave has added some projects to that list, and the idea is to be prepared for the additional funding when it comes through. Now, the last paragraph in the description is RTAC, and they have asked all MPOs to join basically a stimulus package, a coalition of groups. And this group is called Transportation Business Partners. And the Northern Arizona Leadership Alliance has joined it. The Greater Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce has joined it. And there was a meeting just yesterday afternoon, and there was another meeting tomorrow, we'll have a subcommittee to structure the advocacy request. And the idea is we need to move fast and stay ahead of this and advocate. So I have volunteered to serve on that subcommittee. And again, we're meeting tomorrow to really go forth with one unified state voice, actually, hopefully, in partnership with other states to request infrastructure funding. So in terms of fiscal impact, hard to know what's going to come. It would be wonderful if money with fewer strings came so we could just work on projects, but we just have to keep our ear to it. The TAC and the Management Committee did discuss this on April 22nd and 23rd. However, 2 weeks in this era is a lifetime, so we will be bringing it back to them, and it'll probably change a lot in the next 2 weeks as well. And I have a typo here. I said there's no recommendation being made, but in fact, there is a recommendation being made. And I would like to ask this board to sign on to the memo with the business community partners. I've attached it to your packet, and I've discussed this with the chair, Chair Evans and Vice Chair Odegaard in the past few days. I think the good thing about signing on is that it, provides a show of support and a show of force that we're all in this together. I think the risk is there might be some things that are recommended by this group ultimately that we don't entirely support. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to get on the subcommittee to stay involved in it. I feel like it's, and I defer to you all on this, you have all have your own political sensitivities and perspectives. I'm recommending we sign on because at this point it's like just a matter of getting some stimulus funding, and we'll figure out the details of how it's apportioned later. And I recognize that might sound a little cavalier, but with that, I turn it back to Mayor for discussion with the board.
Okay, board, any thoughts and comments?
Jim McCarthy.
Mr. McCarthy?
Jeff and board, it sounds like a good idea to sign on to a letter of support for funding. I do have one concern when it gets down to the level of details, and that's that anytime we take federal money, as I'm sure you know, that there's a lot of strings attached when you so-called federalize a project. And I think that we need to be careful and make rational decisions on detailed cases about if it makes sense or not makes sense. So if it's a county project, then I think we would need to coordinate with the county. A city project, we need to coordinate with the city to see the pluses, and there will be pluses and there will be minuses when you federalize, and just to make a rational decision when it gets down to which specific projects this might be. But the overall concept, I very strongly support. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, if I may, Mayor.
Mr. Ryan?
Oh, thank you. So yeah, we had a discussion of this at RTAC, and actually it's looking at federal funding as one aspect. The good thing about this is it's not just looking at shovel ready, it's looking at broadening the investment at the federal level, almost doubling it, which provides opportunity associated with it. To Jim's point, there were some discussions of there will be a federal aspect, but can there be funding that does come to state and locals? A lot of it's being led by, coordinated through the state engineers. They are a strong coalition, and with everybody unifying behind that, it may be the time that finally there is investment into the transportation system that's been lacking for almost 20 years at this point. So it really does make sense to get behind this effort. The only downfall is it depends. We each have a different hat that we wear. It may or may not be the top priority within our own jurisdictions, but as far as transportation is concerned, it looks like it should be our top priority. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mayor, this is Charlie. So on this topic concerning a letter of support, does Mr. Milebeck want a motion or just in general agreement that we're supportive of adding MetroPlan to the letter of those that are supporting for more funding?
We're looking for board support. Mr. Milebeck?
Yes, Madam Chair and Councilmember Odegaard, looking for board support. A vote would be great, saying you support MetroPlan signing on to the Transportation Business Partners Group would be appreciated.
So I'll make the motion that I move for approval of that.
I'll second the motion. This is Matt Ryan.
There's been a motion made by Mr. Odegaard with a second by Mr. Ryan to move forward in support. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We're now down to the strategic plan update. This is pages 39 and 40 in our board packet. And once again, we are to Mr. Milebeck.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board, another fairly lengthy PowerPoint presentation. Again, I'm going to move pretty quickly through this. It is a report on the strategic work plan and what we have accomplished thus far. And I put together, perhaps not surprisingly, streetlights, green, yellow. Green meaning we're ahead of schedule, yellow meaning we're behind schedule. Red means nothing's been done or the project has stalled out for some reason. And I know if there are folks on this call who have difficulty with colors, I've tried to write in text what the colors are as well so that it's understandable for everybody. And again, I'm going to move quickly. Please just stop me if I'm going too fast. One of the measurable objectives you said is to get out there to at least 10 groups and let people know what MetroPlan does. Green light, we hit the ground running in February with Northern Arizona Leadership Alliance and Greater Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce. And then red with COVID-19. Whether or not, I assume I will get back in and do presentations in person or like this electronically, but nothing at this point is scheduled. This next objective has to do with our regional priorities. We just spent about a half an hour on this. It's a green light. We're ahead of schedule, and we're going to be bringing this back hopefully for board adoption in June to identify our priorities. Similarly, with funding, this was an objective to get clear on what grants is MetroPlan going to pursue. We want to add value. We don't want to compete. We don't want to conflict. We want to be clear on what money we're going to pursue. And again, we've got a funding pursuit item, and we're actually ahead of schedule on identifying these items. In terms of supporting and participating in Milton's Highway 180 plan, I put that as green and yellow. So it's green because MetroPlan and Dave have been very involved. I've been somewhat involved in these meetings. And I put yellow because the original date was supposed to be completed in 2018. The work continues. And at this point, we're hopeful that it will be done by June 30th of 2021. And we will continue to participate in ADOT's planning effort as it unfolds. This is a project we've already talked about. Consider putting $50,000 of MetroPlan funds, into the MetroPlan budget to pass through to small projects like the pedestrian crossing. So this is a green. There's money in the budget this year. It's not in 2022 yet. Let's see how this goes, see if this works. An objective to secure at least $2.1 million And I put yellow. I didn't know how to fit this in a box exactly. We have definitely pursued. So the build grant was $7 million that Dave is going to push send on in a couple of weeks. The state council member Odegaard sent a request for $5 million. Also to the state, we asked for $300,000 for Lone Tree. And then we've already talked about the Build America Bureau and the $10 million roughly potential reduction in costs by getting a low interest loan. But we haven't received anything yet. So we've just been pursuing. To go into some detail, this was a specific objective, $300,000 for the Lone Tree corridor. This one I put yellow and then green because, for one thing, consider is a pretty low bar. What does that mean? We thought about it. So actually we requested $300,000 of ADOT, and Councilmember Odegaard and Supervisor Ryan went with me, and we made the request of Representative Thorpe. It's in progress, but given everything that's happened, we just have simply budgeted $150,000 of Metro Plan funds to do this work in the coming year. And we'll see if this remains a priority as we go through the project prioritization process. Similarly, this $10 million in terms of a low interest loan, I put it as green. We've talked about this one a little already. Dave has done a ton of work, and we're proposing to hand it off to the city after 2020, but we'll continue these discussions. And then a regional transportation model. This is ongoing work, technical work and research and data management that is being done. And it's updated every year, and there's a major update every 3 years. It has to be updated for things like traffic changes, demographics, construction changes, and I've just added this to the list, global pandemics. Also, initiate a 20-year regional transportation plan process. So this is one of our main priorities for the next few years. We're on schedule. We'll be out to bid this summer and have somebody on contract this fall. It'll actually be ahead of schedule. We've got an item to define what it means to be the finest transportation system in the country. I put this as red. I have not engaged to help us figure this out. I would say that I think all the planning work we're doing and strategy discussions we're having will reveal some of this, but it isn't something I've engaged directly. Another project, and there's a lot on this list, so I know I'm moving fast, but we got clear that the city would be leading the Lone Tree corridor effort, J.W. Powell to Butler. So Metro Plan is going to participate in that city-led effort and provide support. So it's in our work plan. I put it as yellow in that the scope statement that Metro Plan put together last year, we interviewed about 50 people, and I think including most of the people in this room. And that was done. And now we're basically standing by and waiting to know how we can help. We also have a lot of ongoing things behind the scenes like Title VI, which is civil rights. The feds and the state require us to do certain things, disadvantaged business enterprise, and state performance targets, and those are all moving along as they are supposed to. We had an item too, and this is a big one for us, educate state leadership about the value of indexing the gas tax for inflation. We're hoping for state action by June 30th. And I put green and red. Because we're very engaged in Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, and the board has passed a couple resolutions and signed letters. And I've got some pictures here of going to the state capitol with Councilmember Odegaard, Ryan, and Representative, and also meeting with Senate President Pan, and also with Representative Teller. So we did a lot on this, and then I'm not blaming everything on COVID-19, but it really did stall out with COVID-19. And then the last one is completing Metro Plan's transition to independence so that we're fully self-sufficient by June 30th. I'm really relieved to say, and I'm knocking on my wooden dining room table here, I really think we're going to make it. And the ADOT contract has been signed. We have tax status, and doing business as MetroPlan status, bank account with actually money in the bank account at this point. We have financial independence. I mean, I have no concern. I'm confident that we're going to be able to manage the finances and all going forward after July 1st. I really want to recognize Rosie Ware, who's in the room. She does a tremendous job with this, and I could not have done it without her. So thank you, Rosie. We have an IGA with Mountain Line. We have an IGA with the city that's going to the city in 2 weeks. Policies have been adopted to make us independent, and we have independent legal counsel. So I really believe we're going to be good to go, and I look forward to exhaling on July 1st when we actually have crossed that finish line. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Board, do you have any additional thoughts and comments?
This is Charlie. I just want to say thank you. It was very good. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We will go ahead and move down to item number F. This is the Executive Director Review and Contract Consideration. I will be the one that will be leading this particular discussion. So thank you for allowing me to do so. I wanted to talk to the board. We have done a lot with MetroPlan, and I wanted to talk to the board about the Executive Director's review and contract. You should all see something up on your screen that has to do with this section, as well as have received information, so you have that in front of you. There was a report that was from myself to the overall board that had recommendations. I'm recommending to the board that we update our executive director's contract to reflect MetroPlan's independence, and that we consider adjustments to the terms, salary, and benefits of the contract. There's background that was provided. Our executive director, Mr. Mailback, was hired in January of 2019, and he's been serving for 17 consecutive months. The current contract that we have was written by the City of Flagstaff and contains language that's very specific to the city. And that language will be inaccurate as of June 28, 2020. When we get to that point, the executive director will the contract will be managed by NAPTA per the terms of the IGA that we have signed. And so we need to have a new contract. We also have our own legal counsel who is also on the call with us today. So we're no longer represented by the City of Flagstaff. And I think that we need to make sure that our contract language is aligned with our new legal counsel's advice. We can also consider some adjustments to the compensation structure. And there is a letter from our executive director that's attached to this. And so I just wanted to start the conversation there. What I would really like the board to allow me to do, and we don't have to go into executive session unless someone in the board would like to get more in depth about contract terms, but I would like to look at the following. And I believe if you look at the letter that we received from Mr. Mailback, as well as I had requested basically a summary of what Mr. Mailback has been doing for us over the course of the past 17 months. I'm requesting the board consider allowing me to sign a contract amendment. I believe that would be the simplest thing to do, with no adjustments to the total compensation. I would like to see that currently right now we have his compensation broken out into different sections. I'd like to update the contract language and just combine all of it under the salary section. Right now we have insurance, automobile, cell phone allowances. I'd like for that all to be considered salary. And this is consistent with what our executive director is asking for, and it has no fiscal implications to it. We also can look at the benefit package and consider providing sick leave, disability benefits, and a severance package. Right now, our executive director does not earn sick leave or disability and has no severance package. Those would have a variable cost to the underlying contract depending on how they were used. And then lastly, have the board consider a one-time bonus. The reason I say a one-time bonus is things are very different right now in the world of COVID, and we're not sure what our financial picture will look like in the next 6 months to a year. And so rather than having a increase in salary, it might be, I think it would be best for us to look at, if we were going to do something with regards to compensation, a one-time bonus type of a situation. So those are my thoughts and recommendations to the board. And I'm interested in seeing what the rest of the board thinks. Board?
Jim McCarthy.
Mr. McCarthy?
Mayor, thank you. As far as combining the salary with the phones and whatever those other expenses were, that makes sense. Like you say, it has no implications. Could you remind us what the current salary plus the phone allowances, et cetera, are? And the reason I asked that, if we're going to consider any changes in salary, I don't know if you want to do that in an open meeting like this. If that's inappropriate, just tell me.
And so I would look to our legal, because unfortunately I did not write down the salary. I can't remember that off the top of my head. We can move into executive session to have the conversation. We are set up to do that. Legal.
Yes, Mayor and members of the Board of Directors, thank you very much. I do happen to have Mr. Melbeck's current contract, but I definitely agree that I think that this would be a good opportunity for a vote to go into an A1 executive session so that we can share numbers and more specifics very openly. And I believe it's also confirmed that Mr. Melbeck has confirmed that he would not seek the A1 to be in open session.
That's correct.
Okay, and that makes sense to me. Would it make sense to do an e-session now, or should we do that at the very end of the meeting so we don't have to go back and forth?
If I may, Madam Mayor?
Yes.
You certainly can do it now. I mean, it's really only a question of convenience. The A1 is directly tied to this agenda item. You can absolutely do it now. Sometimes we do executive sessions at the end to not keep people waiting, but you have every ability to do it now, and it seems most natural now.
Well, I don't know what the logistics are. I mean, if we go into e-session, do we end this Zoom session and start a new one, or what?
I will defer to Rosie if she can help answer these exact mechanics.
This is Rosie Ware. We are prepared to put everyone except the executive board and other relevant parties into a waiting room and pause recording so that we can have an executive session in this Zoom meeting, if that is acceptable to the board. Chair Evans?
I would like to go ahead and do that. I would like to go ahead and do that now, if possible. We do need to get a motion though. So I would say, Mr. McCarthy, if you could do the motion and I could have a second.
I move that we go into executive session.
This is Charlie. I second that.
There's been a motion made by Mr. McCarthy and a second by Mr. Odegaard to go into executive session. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Rosie, can you help move those individuals to the waiting room for me?
Chair Evans, I will do that now. Let's see.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm assuming I'm being moved out and that Brandon, will Rosie also stay in the room?
I don't believe Rosie will stay in because I have the ability to be the admin. I just don't know how to move people out of a meeting. And I believe you could go to, well, Mr. Mileback.
If I may,
Rosie, is that
Madam Mayor.
correct? Yes.
You know, it's the board's choice as to whether you want Mr. Milebeck to participate in some, all, or none of the executive session. That is completely up to you. You can start without him, bring him in later. You can start with him, ask him to leave at a certain point. It's completely up to the board.
Board, what would you like to see?
Mayor Jim McCarthy, I think for the part of it that we talk about, are we going to give him a raise? And that probably, he should probably not be in there for that. As far as the general discussion is
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead.
As far as the general discussion is
Yeah,
outlined
we're
in
gonna,
the letter, maybe it would make sense. On the other hand, it's pretty laid out in a lot of detail in the letter. There may not be a need for further details from Jeff.
so I would just ask the board, has every member had the opportunity to look at the letter that was provided by Mr. Malback?
McCarthy has.
And if so, do you have any questions
Thompson
that are
here.
related to what the information that's in the letter? Mr. Thompson?
I don't. I read through it and I don't have any questions.
I'm not hearing that there's any questions off of what Mr. Malbec has provided. So I would like to go ahead and have Mr. Malbec take a seat in the waiting room.
Hey, Rosie's going to move me out.
And I don't know how to do that. So, okay, I'm like, I don't know how to do that.
It's very easy. You just ask Rose to do it.
No, I'm liking this. Everyone needs a Rosie. Thank you,
Hey,
Rosie.
Coral, do you know how to get all of Rosie and everyone else back?
Well,
a phone call or?
Chair Evans, if I may, I don't.
Rosie's going to tell us. Rosie, how?
Yeah, I do not have the ability to take myself out or put myself in the waiting room. If I do that, I won't be able to manage the meeting. But if you, I don't know if you have the ability to do this, but if you go to manage participants at the bottom.
I see that. I'm looking at it now.
I don't know if you can click next to me and make any changes on my name. If you can kick me out, you can do that. I'm the last person other than the board and legal counsel in the room.
I am looking right now at individuals, right? So I just clicked onto you. I can't unhost you because you don't show up. I see that there's 5 people in the waiting room, and I see that there's a total of 8 of us in the meeting, but I don't have a button specifically for you.
Okay, I just made you the host. You may be able to put me in the
Okay.
waiting room now.
So I'm all looking because I see you. Participant to chat with, save chat, mute, invite. Okay, there you are. So I am going to go to you. I'm going to do more. And I'm going to put you in the waiting room. Bye, Rosie.
Bye.